Oh, sorry, I was rocking out to that music. I am Dave Champion, and this is my co-host, Bill Carns, and together we are totally unprepared. It is nice to be back with you again. We were not here last week. Bill had some personal business to attend to, but here we are again. And of course, we are totally unprepared. What did we decide we were going to talk about?
The day that we're filming this show is the day before it airs, and just a few hours ago, there's a few things that happened. First, the Chinese stock market started to crash. Wall Street, United Airlines, and the Washington Post, I think it was.
No, American Airlines, the Wall Street Journal. And the New York Stock Exchange shut down.
I think it was United Airlines.
Claiming a glitch.
Yeah, but they were simultaneous.
Yeah, and of course today then, the Chinese stock market goes bonkers. Okay?
Right.
And experienced traders don't believe it's just simply a matter of ordinary trades. There's something else going on behind the scenes. Whether it's computer hacking, whatever, we don't know, and probably the way these things are handled, we'll never know.
But we'll be given a story, but we won't know.
Right. Now, the buzz, if you will, in the media put out by the government is that the occurrences here in this country, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Stock Exchange, American Airlines.
United Airlines.
Did I say?
You said American twice.
Okay.
It's United. Just correction.
An airline.
Airline. That one airline.
Those guys.
That TWA.
This was all a result of Chinese hackers.
Right.
Now, here in this country, we have been led to believe, and I do believe it's true, that China has made a Super Bowl type effort to be some of the premier hackers on the planet. I think any major country that doesn't have that sort of cyber warfare unit going on isn't in the game at all today. Certainly the United States does. But isn't it funny, when you live in the United States, all you hear about is the Chinese hackers. You never hear about the NSA hackers, because believe me, whatever the Chinese are doing here, we're doing it tenfold over there.
You know, I got to tell you, my philosophy on this is I'm not so sure. It might be Chinese hackers, but they might not be from China. They might be of Chinese descent working for the NSA.
Absolutely.
So when they say Chinese hackers, yeah, it was Danny, Jim, and Bobby. They're all from Chinese descent.
Right,
but they work for us. They're the ones that did it.
Yeah, whenever you talk about intelligence, which this whole cyber warfare, by the way, that's what it's called in the government circles. It's a cyber warfare effort. Okay, so in this cyber warfare, probably 95% of it is considered part of the operations of the intelligence part of, and I mean intelligence as in a title, not an attribute, of government. Okay, and part of intelligence is, of course, to feign and mislead, and that's part of the intelligence game. And we know from previous statements of CIA directors that they're not just playing these games on our enemies, they're playing these games, these deceptions on our allies, and indeed on the American people, with intent, based on the statements of previous CIA directors. So one of the things I can't help but, and the United States has a long history of creating boogeymen.
Oh, yes.
To go to war against.
Right. Islam has been the boogeyman for the last 50 years.
And it was the Soviets before that. And the United States has always, the media and the government has always whooped up a boogeyman so that Americans then will rally, sometimes through fear, sometimes through a false sense of patriotism, and raise their hand and say, yes, let's spend trillions of dollars to kill the boogeyman. And then, of course,
my team effort.
Everybody gets rich, except the people. So I wonder. And I think sometimes people imagine when I'm saying this, I'm like attacking my own country. That's nonsense. That's like saying, I don't feel well today, I have the flu. I'm criticizing myself. I mean, to know what's going on with my country and to say, look, this is what's going on, is not to condemn my country. It's to say we need to know what our country is doing.
And just to caveat on that for a moment, Dave, we just finished the Independence Day weekend. Everybody likes to go, it's 4th of July. 4th of July is a date on the calendar. What we're dealing with is Independence Day. Mm-hmm. And I am still a patriot. Mm-hmm. I'm still patriotic. Not for my government, mm-hmm. but for my country. what my country is or what it was, my government's really torn that apart. And Obama has helped to really tear it down. Of course, G.W. Bush and this whole 9/11 Islam boogeyman thing has helped to tear it down. It's been coming for quite some time. We've been tearing this country down little by little by little for decades.
Yes.
But that's not what I celebrate on Independence Day.
Oh, understood. Right.
So I can tell I'm critical of our government at virtually every aspect and at virtually every level. Because there is so many ways, we were talking about this at lunch, some things that you were telling me I wasn't even completely aware of, and I've actually dealt in that industry a bit. But just for the sake of argument, I am patriotic for the love of my country and my countrymen, not for the government that exists right now.
Understood. And the way I characterize that is my respect, my adoration is for the principles of liberty. My patriotism, I'm not even sure I like the word in this context. My support for the governmental structure we have is dependent on how that governmental structure, how closely it aligns itself with the principles of liberty. My commitment is to the principles of liberty, period, end of story. Okay? Anyone or any entity or any structure or any system that is down with liberty, I'm down with them. The more they move away from the paradigm of liberty, the more they become my adversaries and eventually perhaps my enemies. And it doesn't matter who they are. It's funny, I had somebody say to me, obviously somebody who's concerned about race issues, he said, well, Dave, you know, in the next 20 years, white folks are not going to be the majority in America anymore.
Oh, we talked about this on the show a couple, 2-3 months ago.
Yeah, I said, all right. I said, I'm not concerned with who the majority is. I'm concerned with what they're doing. Okay.
Yeah. That even goes, that takes us to another level of people saying, we need to have a woman as president or a Hispanic as president. You know what? You are morons, that people that are calling. You need to have some sort of thing about you to be president. No, we need the best person for the job.
Yeah,
we don't need somebody in there based on their gender, based on what country they were from, or their ancestors are from, or what religion they are. We need to have a Jew as president. We need to have a Buddhist as president. That is just asinine. We need to have the best person for the job who operates under the principles of liberty, which the way that it's maligned right now, that won't happen again.
It's virtually an impossibility. Yeah. But back to our hacking thing. Well, that one sort of went awry a little bit.
That's okay. It was good stuff.
Yes.
I think that's what some of our viewers tune in for.
I question how many times when the United States government tells the media, by the way, for those of you who don't know, oftentimes the government holds a press conference, they do like a 1-minute statement, and then they go around the room and they hand out a press pack to all the reporters, which has documentation, it's got a thumb drive with everything on it, and the reporter goes back in, plugs it into his computer, brings up the documents, pulls the parts they want and create the article. So it's essentially the government giving the reporter an easy way not to do a job and just report what the government says.
Right, yeah.
They're
more administrative than journalistic.
That's probably the lion's share of reporting on something that the government says. The government just says, here's what we say, and there's no vetting whether it's accurate or true.
All of our information about ISIS comes that way.
Correct.
Nobody's independent on the ground. Nobody's given independent reports or anything. Everything comes through the State Department.
So when the United States government hands out their little press pack to the media, and the media, like Pavlov's dog, takes it and runs back and reports what the government said, and the government says, China did it. Or what was the case not long ago? North Korea, whose internet is probably 2 tin cans with a string.
Right. I mean, come on.
So, I wonder, I don't wonder, I'm fairly confident that in at least a percentage of these cases, it's NSA doing the hacking with the intention of then saying, he did it! So the American people will build up an animosity towards whoever that guy is that they're pointing to. The North Korea thing was a perfect example. And it was hacking Sony, right? That was the big deal.
Yeah.
Okay, so leaving that movie aside, okay, whatever that silly movie was.
It was totally silly. I watched it. It was ridiculously silly. Funny.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't possibly have taken it serious.
Yeah. Now, I understand that North Korea is like on a different intellectual level than a lot of the rest of the world. But really, I mean, I'm just imagining the government organs of any government. Oh, there's a silly comedy You better get on it and hack that. Not buying it, not for a minute.
And you know,
but it was used to try and strengthen laws in this country.
Of course it was.
Concerning how the internet operates.
That's right. And now you had 3 out of 5 people vote to regulate the internet at the FCC level. Come on, who are you guys? You know, it's interesting with North Korea. We're talking about a country that when they travel by mass transit, it is still by a steam locomotive.
Is it really?
Coal-powered steam locomotives is how they travel in that country. So we're talking about, but yet they have hackers that are good enough to get into Sony, which has a pretty sizable layer of security there.
Well, I think Sony's annual budget is probably higher than North Korea's.
Probably. They probably have, a larger gross domestic.
Gross profit at the end of the year.
Yeah. You know, a guy that you and I both know, he lives in town and he designs websites and he does web hosting and everything, and that's his industry. He used to have a website 5 or 6 years ago that was all very liberty-minded, patriot sort of stuff, and very critical of individuals, things within the government, things that went on, and exposing this kind of thing. And his site was getting hacked 2 and 3 times a week. And you know where he traced the IP address to?
Where?
Washington, D.C.
I am not surprised. When I first I forget which website, it might have been originalintent.org. You're right, that's no longer mine. But back when it was, and I was putting content on there, some of the first visitors after I posted the articles on taxation, some of the first visitors' address went back to IRS in D.C., Treasury Department in D.C., within days of my putting the articles up. I mean, come on.
Well, maybe they were trying to learn a little bit more about their jobs.
Freedom, baby. When you put something up and all of a sudden the government's there instantly looking at what you put up. Yeah,
well, hopefully they were looking at it and realizing, oh, yeah, you know, we are breaking the law through this sort of enforcement and that sort of thing. Wow, we should probably look at changing the laws to where we're not breaking them. Oh, rats, the Supreme Court's already ruled on it.
Yeah, no, we'd rather practice chilling free speech by immediately going to when people post articles and looking at their articles.
Yeah, that's built up on these guys. Folks, we'll be back for the next segment right after this.
All right, we are back, and now this. All right, what is up with people imagining that things like federal injunctions are somehow legitimate or should discredit the object of the injunction? Let me tell you specifically what I'm talking about. Over my many years of studying U.S. tax law, which I'm probably more than 20 years now, and writing what many people consider to be the seminal work on who the tax is actually upon based on the limited constitutional application, which not 1 in a million Americans actually knows, cares about, or understands, I found that once social media became popular, I found that there are 2 groups of people who try to discredit on the tax subject. One, of course, is the status quo folks, the people who are in the accounting industry or they rely on the accounting industry. There's one guy, Jay Atkinson, who's a multimillionaire from being an accountant to other multimillionaires. And of course, he's excoriated me because he obviously does not want the truth of the income tax to get out. The other group of people that post information that attempts to discredit are some knuckleheads in the town of Pahrump. Now, I haven't noticed that anywhere else. Social media across the country, I can say whatever I want. Nobody rushes to post a link to the federal injunction against me, which I'm going to explain in a minute, except people in Pahrump and almost exclusively Whirly worshipers. Now, I want to talk about, if you imagine that a federal court dealing with a government request to enjoin somebody concerning preserving the criminal misapplication of the tax code is going to be some sort of legitimate enterprise, you're an idiot, okay? Or you're just so ill-informed that you should be quiet. So I wanted to make an offer to these people who try to, by the way, I should say, if you're unaware, I was enjoined. The federal court, the federal government did take me to court before a corrupt judge by the name of Percy Anderson out of LA, and they did secure an injunction that stops me from doing one thing and one thing only. And that thing is, I am not allowed to assist non-taxpayers. These are people upon whom the tax laws do not operate and have not made them liable. I am not able to assist non-taxpayers in living out that lifestyle successfully. I can't be their consultant. That is the one and only thing I am not allowed to do. Now, the reason I'm not allowed to do that is I was highly successful at it, and of course, nothing creates success like success. So when you have thousands of clients all across the country who know that the tax laws don't operate on them, and they're living happy, successful, profitable, and productive lives, steering clear of the tax code, that's a problem for the United States government. It doesn't mean they're right or I'm wrong. It means on a practical basis, I must be stopped because I'm doing something that they consider a threat. Right and wrong does not even enter into the equation. Now, I'm going to make an offer to some of these knuckleheads, okay? But before I do that, I wanted to read to you what Percy Anderson said, that's the judge, said in his decision that I have said. This is why I'm bad and wrong, okay, is for having said these things. I have said, according to Percy Anderson, by the way, you should know that these representations were made by an IRS agent out of D.C. who'd been assigned for years to shut me down, who swore to these things in a declaration before the court while using a pseudonym. It says right in his declaration that his name is Thomas Chung, which is a IRS-approved pseudonym. So here we have a mystery guy using a mystery name going into a corrupt court before a corrupt judge, and people imagine that this is somehow credible. Now, the first thing that Percy Anderson said, I said, he just said, since the IRS said you said it, you did, okay? Filing an income tax return is voluntary. Okay? That's the first thing he said. Now, not only have I never, ever in my life said that, I have spent years saying exactly the opposite. The next thing that Percy Anderson claimed I said was that the term person in law, as used in the tax code, is not an individual. It's not me and you. Guess what? Never said that, ever, 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 not even close, not even within shouting distance. All right, and lastly, that wages as defined in the tax code are not subject to the federal income tax. And guess what again? Never said that in my life. So here we have Percy Anderson saying, I've said all these things, and that because I've said these things, these are only three things, by the way, that he said I said. So I want to be clear. He claimed I said three things, and I just shared them with you. He claimed that because they are patently false, which they are, that I must be enjoined from assisting non-taxpayers. Okay? Now, the question is, we know Thomas Chung, the pseudonym from the IRS, told the court Dave Champion said these things. Now, here's the interesting thing. As the case proceeded, in one of the filings, the IRS happened to mention that it has my book, Income Tax Shattering the Myths. Okay? The government admitted they have a copy of this book. Now, guess what's in this book, as you can imagine, okay? What's in this book is 100% of my thoughts on the income tax, the laws, the regulations, the Treasury orders, Treasury decisions, the U.S. Supreme Court cases, everything that I know to be so concerning the income tax is in these 445 pages. And the government had a copy. Now, does it not make sense if you are a rational human being trying to accomplish something honest and lawful, that what you would say to the court is, Your Honor, here on page 247, Mr. Champion says blah, 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 and we would like you to certify that that's false. Because that would be, right, my words, not some knucklehead from the IRS lying about what I've said. So, to the douchebags who consistently post this link to the injunction as if it somehow discredits me, I make the following offer. By the way, this applies to people who are in the town of Pahrump. This book has a retail price of $140. I will loan the book to you with a written contract for 60 days. At the end of 60 days, you will return the book to me, or you will pay the price, the retail price of the book to me, and keep the book, your choice. However, you will also agree in the contract that at the end of the 60 days, you will do one of two things. You will either provide me with a written statement that says, Mr. Champion, you said what Percy Anderson said you said on page number, paragraph, and line number, okay? So that everybody can see that I supposedly said these things, right? In my book, which is, again, has 100% of my views on taxes. In the contract, it will also state that if you fail to provide me with that within 60 days, you are admitting and acknowledging, and I can use your name and say you admit and acknowledge that nowhere in my book have I ever said the things that Percy Anderson said I said. Okay? Now, and then if you post the link to the injunction again, I'm going to come right behind you and I'm going to post this segment from the show where I say this offer was made to you. You could have proven your point, but you're too cowardly and you don't care about the facts. You don't care about the truth. I make this offer freely. I'll meet with you. I'll shake your hand. I'll smile. I'll joke around with you. I'll hand you a copy of the book. You sign the contract, and in 60 days, you either buy the book or return the book to me, and you provide the statement or don't. If you don't, contractually, you've already committed to the fact that that is an acknowledgement. I never said any of these things. Now, it doesn't have to be all three if you can find even one, because you won't, because it's not in there, because I've never said it. But that's my offer to the scumbags who consistently post that link about something which is an utter and complete fabrication on the part of the United States government, substantiated by an employee of the United States government in a very corrupt system. By the way, this is the same judge, Percy Anderson, that as part of the hearing, I didn't want to give any information, obviously, about my clients. And so I took the fifth. And you know what Percy Anderson said? If you take the fifth in my court, I'm going to put you in jail. That's how corrupt that asshole is. Bill, what do you think about all this?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, do you think that the IRS paid full boat retail price for the book?
I'm thinking no.
Okay. Scumbags. And the other thing is this. If you can't attack the message,
right,
you attack the messenger. And that is the lowest form of attack. And most people who see that know it now. Most people know, look, somebody is attacking another person, not the message that they put up. It's happened to me on social media because people are their keyboard commandos.
Yes.
So if they can't attack the message, they just don't like it, then they'll go after you. And that's schoolyard sort of bullying tactics that we all should have grown out of. But unfortunately, there's people, although you might have grown out of it physically, mentally, you're still pretty much an infant, and you can't seem to get past that. So you're right. I mean, that's just a weak way of going about it. You're obviously articulate, well-read, and you've been there and done that in a whole lot of areas. And I was with you every step of the way. I have to tell you, I take a little bit of credit for your book, because we were talking about it. You were telling me about this thing forever, and finally I said, Dave, you've got to schedule to write this book. And you finally did. You took Mondays off for better part of a year to write it, edit it, get it all together, and every week you would get a chapter, a majority of a chapter done. You were dedicated, you got it done, and thank you. You gave me a copy of it, a hardback copy, and I really appreciate that. I've used it in an article that I recently wrote. As a matter of fact, it's in the current edition of Pahrump Life magazine.
Oh, nice.
It's about, I don't know, not quite 1,100 words, basically just talking about what the income tax is and really where our tax money goes to, what really happens. So check out the latest edition of Pahrump Life magazine. And I used your book as reference on a good portion of that.
Good. Also, I've gotten feedback from attorneys who practice in the federal system who have purchased and read the book. As a matter of fact, one of the first gentlemen to purchase the book, I think he was like the 7th purchaser when the book went on sale, was a very high-profile criminal tax attorney back in the Midwest. If I said his name, which I won't, most people, well, people who follow tax issues would know his name. And the feedback I've gotten from every single attorney who's read this book is that they write me back and they say, we get it now. We didn't know all of that. We weren't taught that, but you're right. I've checked all the citations. I've checked all the facts. and your conclusions, that's the important part for an attorney, your conclusions are absolutely accurate. But Dave, the problem is, this is from these federal attorneys, the problem is I don't know how to get a federal judge to rule with integrity and honor and properly on this subject. So my question has always been, what does that say about our country and about our court system, where when people read something and they say it's the God's honest truth, they can't get a judge to agree?
Which is why you're credible.
And I'll be back.
Welcome back. Now it's time for this. You know what really grinds my gears? Amateur gun builders. Basically people that will buy a gun and some accessories and then just start throwing it together, hoping that it works out, figuring that it should work out, or sometimes not even having that cognitive process, and they just slap stuff together, and then it doesn't work when they're out in the field trying to accomplish something. Especially like this time of year coming up soon, we're gonna have hunters that are out there. They'll slap something together, and you know, there's a real problem with the way Americans tend to do this. We usually, as a society, buy the most expensive gun we can find. And then all of the accessories are the crappiest thing we can get. We'll go to Walmart and buy a Simmons scope or BSA scope for 40 bucks and slap it on top of a $1,200 rifle with some sort of a scope mount we're not even familiar with, but it kind of fit on there okay. I'm just gonna crank this thing down and hope that it works out. Then we buy the crappiest ammo we can, especially to sight the rifle in, and then we'll buy one box of decent stuff before we go out on our deer hunt, elk hunt, antelope hunt, whatever it is. You don't know what you're doing, and your gear will fail you. So, Dave, what I want to do is talk about my latest build that I've put together for a very close friend of mine. Let's pan this out. Now, I put these things together properly. And
Yes,
Dave,
you
you've
do.
seen a number of guns that I've put together.
I have.
Now, this is a precision rifle. This is a hunting rifle and then some, which is why I brought this one in.
Okay.
I could have brought in any number of hunting rifles, but this is a precision rifle. This here, it's a...
Let me interrupt you for a moment.
Yes.
Because our audience is not all gun guys like we are. Okay.
I'm lingoing already,
Yes.
aren't I?
Define for them precision rifle.
A precision rifle is designed, essentially, it's a kinder, softer word for a sniper rifle, or for a competition rifle, where really you're looking for a single shot or maybe a small group, 3 to 5 shots at long distance with very predictable accuracy. If you do your job, the gun will certainly do it.
Okay. So, to put it in almost humorous terms, the ability to reach out at distance and touch someone.
Correct. Okay. Yes, that would be an option
And
to deploy. Yes.
As far as range is concerned, far beyond what your average battle rifle would do.
Yes.
That's what distinguishes a
Yes,
precision
and
rifle.
let's take a battle rifle of, say, an AR-15 or an AK-47 or an SKS, something like that. We're talking effective ranges out to 300, maybe 400 yards,
maybe.
if we're really pushing it out there. These are far beyond that. And with hunting rifles, most hunting rifles have the same basic setup as a precision rifle, the same basic form, but hunters oftentimes don't believe that they can actually get that sort of distance. And more common than not, they don't have the availability to get that distance in the field, unless maybe you're in Wyoming. There's actually areas in Hawaii where you can take shots over 1,000 yards.
Yeah, that's very, very rare, though. I mean,
it is rare.
Most hunters, I'm going to guess, under 200?
Generally, yes, but not that your gun can't do it. And the thing is, if your gun's not hitting very well at 800 yards, you're going to have trouble back at 200 yards.
Correct.
So you want to really overtrain for it with the gun. So this is a gun that encompasses all of those sorts of things. I wanted to bring up, and I'll be honest with you, this is partially a sales pitch because it drives me nuts when people put their guns together and they're horrible and their trip is ruined. If you're gonna go out and you're gonna go deer, elk, or antelope hunting, you're gonna be into this for thousands and thousands of dollars. Some of the most expensive meat you'll ever buy.
Now,
it's wild game that you hunt.
Let me interrupt, I want the audience to understand your credibility on this. Okay. I've taken, I can't tell you how many firearms classes in my lifetime, precision rifle classes, and I attended, was it 4 years ago now?
Five years ago.
I attended Bill's precision rifle course out here in Pahrump, which was attended by what, 30, 40 people?
26.
26 people.
From Hawaii to the East Coast.
Yes, and I think every single person who came out there would say it was the most enjoyable, most informative, most productive precision rifle course they've ever taken, and some of them gone to some pretty good schools. So I just wanted the audience to understand your credibility. This is not something that you're mildly familiar with. You're the guy who teaches at the highest levels.
And what was I doing the day before at my house? People that were flying, it was a 3-day class. The day before that, people were coming in, they were bringing their gear. I had a tournament-sized pool table, all covered and set up. And what was I doing? I was putting these rifles together. Now, they had to come in with some of the stuff that was, so I didn't have to go so far. But I want to go through some of the things you need to do to make sure you have your rifle properly set up. And if you say you've had a rifle for many years, maybe it's been a family heirloom, it was grandpa's rifle, and then dad's, and then yours, and it's eventually going to be your sons and then their sons. Sometimes these things need to have some maintenance done. The first thing to start with is what I do is I treat the barrel, and it's a cold lapping system. Okay, now what that does is on a new barrel, when you cut the grooves for the rifling, you know, if you cut a piece of wood or anything, you have some little edges that flare up. That's in the rifling of every new gun. It's just the way it is.
Right.
So I have a system that you don't fire it. It's cold done through proper chemicals and paste and polishers and such as that. It takes a long time. I did this barrel 4 times. It took me 2 hours to get this barrel perfect. And it also keeps it, if you've ever had any trouble with some fouling in your gun, you shoot it when you shouldn't because it's a little too dirty or what have you, you can have some inconsistencies in the barrel. This system that I use helps to get all that back and really dial the accuracy back in. I've had people that have fired their guns and they say, I've shot the barrel out. I do my lapping and cleaning system to it and get it completely perfect, completely smooth, and they dial it right back into sub-minute of angle, which is less than an inch at 100 yards. Now this gun, I will actually be sighting this in tomorrow morning before this show. I haven't fired a single round out of it yet. I'll be doing that tomorrow morning before this show airs. And this gun should be capable of same hole groups at 100 yards.
You just built this?
I just built this over the weekend.
All right.
So this is a Remington 700 AAC SD. It's a 20-inch bull barrel chambered in .308 Winchester, which I have some in the saddle. And the SD part of it is because from the factory, it comes with a 5/8 by 24 threaded barrel. And you could put a flash hider, you could put a muzzle brake, or you could put a suppressor on there if you own Class 3 stuff. Or if you're a police department and you can put a suppressor on there, this is the base to go with. It's got a 1 in 10 twist, which means for every 10 inches of barrel travel, the bullet does 1 full 360-degree revolution. So there's 2 in this barrel. That helps stabilize it. The twist rate and the barrel length combined help determine how far the bullet will be stable downrange.
In conjunction with the bullet weight and velocity.
Exactly. So if you go to a 1 in 10 twist, you can shoot a heavier bullet than, say, a 1 in 12 or a 1 in 14. Those heavier bullets, the faster bullets, slow down at a faster rate. They won't have the distance. So this gun with a 20-inch barrel and a 1 in 10 twist will get the same distance as a 1 in 12 twist 24-inch barrel if you use a heavier round.
I'm going to presume that, like me, you favor the 175 grain and .308?
I do, and this gun actually in particular, I'm going to sight it in and do ballistics with chronographing and everything with a bullet drop sheet out to 1,000 yards with this gun tomorrow. It's going to be all part of what I do, and this gun will actually, if you could get 100...
It's what I do.
It's what I do. You can get the Berger 190 grain VLD, very low drag, match bullets, and put the 190 grains in this gun, and it would probably do 1,200 yards. Now, a couple of things on this, as we've only got about 4 minutes left. There's the scope base on here is a one-piece base designed just for this receiver.
Right.
Now, we had to tap the receiver, the holes that were pre-drilled in the receiver to fit the base just a little bit, and I sent that off to a friend of mine who's a certified gunsmith. He has the jigs, he did that drilling,
Right.
I did everything else.
Very delicate procedure.
This is a 20 MOA base, meaning 20 minutes of angle built into the base, because most of the time you set up a scope, crosshairs are set up in the scope, and it's halfway to the elevation and halfway to the windage. If you build 20 MOA into it, then you actually dial the scope towards the higher end, so you have more distance to dial it down when you get out to the range.
And you just lost 99% of the people.
That's okay. I can explain this to you if you get a hold of me. So all of the barrel lapping was done. We put the base on there, and not only do we put the base in there, we put it in there properly with the proper torque specs and with the proper torque specs, the proper instrument to allow for those torque specs, and they're in inch pounds. Then with these rings, I actually lap the rings. That means smoothing them. I have a device. You put the rings in here. You put this device on there. You put 250 grit goop, if you will, and you run it through there, and you get the ring smooth. What that does is that allows for the rings to actually get a positive grip, about 90% grip on the tube of the actual scope. And the rings have to be a certain height. Now, some people will look, you really want to have this objective lens down here as close to the barrel as you can without it hitting. And some people say you could have used a lower ring. Well, for that objective, you could. But if you look back here at the focal area, there's hardly any room at the back of this. So these are the rings that we needed. These are a medium ring. Also, your glass is very expensive generally. Have some proper scope covers. Now, this scope cover, as you can see, actually goes to the side, not up top. Sometimes you want to look over. And this being set up for a right-handed shooter, he's going to want to open his left eye to see, so this would not be properly placed over here. All kinds of little stuff.
Whose optic is this? Who makes this?
This is actually an SWFA Super Sniper 10x42. It's a fixed power, 10 power scope with a 42 millimeter objective. This is a quality budget scope. Now, I generally go with scopes that cost...
This is not up there with Nikon
or Night Force or Loophole. No, it's not. This is about a $450 scope, which is normally about half or a third of what you'd normally spend on this kind of gun.
About a third of really good glass.
Right.
For this gun.
We also have the bipod put on there properly. These are all torqued properly. I laser bore sight the scope, so if you want to sight it in, that's fine. If I do it, it's set up so I can get it done. There's this pouch on the back which has a cheek rest. It holds ammo there. It's got its own little purse, for lack of a better term, back here. And it's also got the proper type of sling on it. And this bipod, it swivels for different elevation, plus it extends, and it's got these various different little doohickeys. You can be on unlevel ground to level it up and swivel the gun. This is the way to set it up.
Which is what I have on all mine as well.
Yes, this is absolutely the way to set these guns up, and I can do this.
Time is fleeting, so I know you said this is kind of an advertisement, and as it should be, because you're the expert, and so many people have no clue about this.
And I have all the tools and all the measurements.
What do you want them to do?
If you just email us, billanddaveshow@gmail.com. We'll have it up in the next segment. Here it is, daveandbillshow@gmail.com. And get a hold of me, and we can talk about how many of these things you may want to have done. And from there, I can decide how much it would actually be. But your gear's going to work for years and years and years. We'll be right back.
Do that. See ya.
That's
you.
I'm going.
You.
Okay. We're totally unprepared, hence the name of the show.
Anything we blow, we are covered. All we have to do is say we're totally unprepared.
It's so funny because I remember when we were discussing the show and what should we call it, and you came up with the name Totally Unprepared. You said, but I don't know about that. And I'm like, no, wait. That'll totally cover us every time something like this happens. Exhibit A. Actually, it's probably about Exhibit W by now.
That's right.
But, okay, so segment 4, this is where we go through our viewer email bag, if you will, daveandbillshow@gmail.com. That's where you send us your topics. We have a couple that we're going to cover today. And then also, if you ever want to watch a show or listen to the show, whatever, totallyunprepared.info. That's watch, stream, download. It links to our Facebook page. It links to YouTube. Our Twitter, we should create some of this garbage. There's so much of it. We don't actually tweet, or I don't. But so anyhow, that's where you can go. So with that being said,
he just told you where to go.
That's where you can go. We we actually had a pretty interesting Facebook comment.
Oh, we did. Oh, yes. It's so funny. A gal who is known to us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Left a message for us and said she loves to tune into the show because she can't wait to see what a couple of assholes like us are going to do next.
Yeah, we're such a-holes that she wants to. And my response was, you know what? I don't care if you're watching or why you're watching, just as long as you're watching. Go ahead and watch. We want to support our advertisers and local businesses. And regardless of how drugged and medicated that you happen to might be, that particular person, at least maybe someday you'll find yourself, hey, you know what, my drunken, drugged up stupor, I remember seeing this particular company advertised while I was watching those a-holes on Totally Unprepared. Well, maybe I'll go shop there.
That's the thing. It's like, we've known each other a long time, right?
Yeah.
It's like, we're bothered because somebody writes us for a couple of assholes. We're like, yeah, and?
It's like, I get called that on a regular basis.
That's right. You need to step it up.
Yeah, come on. I mean, okay, so one of the emails that came in was, what is our opinion of a Supreme Court case that came down?
Yes.
And the situation in the case was there was a husband and a wife. Police showed up. They wanted to come into the house and look around. He told them no. The police arrested him.
Now, hang on, we need to clarify. They did not arrest him for saying no.
No, they didn't arrest him for saying no. They first asked him, can we come in? He said no. Later on, a few minutes later, they decided to place him under arrest.
For an unrelated issue?
Unrelated issue.
Yes.
Then they go back to the door and they ask the wife, may we come in and search the house? To which she said yes. And in the house, they found stuff that they then inevitably charged them on. So the case was, he told you no. And they were fighting that his wife said, okay, well, yeah, now that he's been arrested and he's in custody, you come back and ask me, I say yes. You come in, you find stuff without a search warrant because I gave you an okay.
Right.
So what is our thoughts on this particular case? That's really what this email gets down to. And this comes from one of our viewers out of state back east.
It's amazing how many people give consent. Just before I answer the question, I mean, you remember your cop days. I mean, what percentage of vehicles did you search with consent?
Oh, 90%.
Yeah, I'm going to say for me it was probably like 96, 97% of the vehicles I searched with consent.
Yeah.
Crazy. Don't do that. Even if you
never.
Yeah, even if you are as innocent as the day is long. Never consent to a search.
Yeah,
never.
Because I'll tell you this, you have nothing to gain by talking to the cops or allowing them to do anything. You have only something to lose. If a police officer stops you, you cannot possibly leave there with more than what you got into it with. You can only stand to lose when dealing with the cops.
Yeah. And do not buy into this line. Oh, you don't want me to search? Now I know you're hiding. What are you hiding? Now I know you're hiding something. What are you hiding?
Yeah.
Don't buy into that. Just look at me and go, I'm not hiding a damn thing. It's called privacy. Unless you have a warrant, you're done.
Yeah, and by the way, they now, in this same session that came out, they can't hold you indefinitely to bring a drug dog out to sniff and give a false command, so then they can search.
Which was the old threat.
Yeah,
you don't have to grant me consent, but I'll keep you here on the side of the road for 3 hours until I get a canine.
Yeah, they can't do it. If the dog's around the corner and wouldn't really take extra time, then they could do that, but literally, that's for the most part gone now.
All right, so as to...
knowledge is power.
It was Dan, right, the emailer?
I believe so.
Okay,
yeah.
So on to Dan's question. A lot of people have characterized that decision as now police can search without a warrant. And I think that was a headline when the decision came out. And I think that's a case of really an inapt, inappropriate headline.
They've always been able to search without a warrant with consent.
With consent.
So
right.
now the thing is, it's differing consent. Somebody says yes, somebody says no.
Right.
That's what this gets to.
And I think we're all uncomfortable with the idea that a homeowner or a resident said no, and then the cops come in. I think we're all at a certain level uncomfortable with that. However, when the guy, let's say, I don't remember what this guy did to get arrested. I read the case at the time, but I forget. Let's say he took a poke at an officer, okay? So now you're going to jail for assault on a police officer. Handcuff him, put him down in the car, come back up and say, may I search? And the wife or girlfriend or whoever says yes, okay? I don't see how the court could have come to any other conclusion. If the person granting consent has legal control over that area that you've asked to search and gives consent, I don't see any way for the court to say, no, you can't because the other guy said no. The question presented to the court was very narrow. It was one person says no, they're gone. Remaining person says yes. Okay, that's a very narrow question on a very narrow set of circumstances. I think what I want to be clear with, and I hope that law enforcement got this message, arresting the person who says no cannot be a contrivance.
Correct. You can't do that in an effort to get somebody else to say yes.
Right.
You can't arrest them to remove them from the picture,
right,
in order to ask somebody else.
Right. In this case, the officers had probable cause to arrest the guy saying no for something unrelated to his saying no.
Yeah, which was not in dispute.
Correct. No, nobody disputed that it was a legitimate arrest.
It was the future charges based on the search, the
right,
consent to search.
The place that I think this gets muddy is if law enforcement cooks something up. For instance, the wife is in the background. She says, yeah, you can search the house. And the guy's at the front door. He says, no, you cannot. So the cop says, so we just step out here for a moment and talk to me. So he steps out onto the front porch. Wife's no longer can see him. He's out of her view. All of a sudden, they throw him on the ground and handcuff him and say that he attempted to strike them. Okay, something like that that's a contrivance because they see what the situation is, and if they lie, you know better than anybody as of about a month ago how readily cops, well, you've always known, but you had it happen to you personally. It happens, and it happens all the time. I've been a huge advocate, for instance, of canines going away because canine handlers all too often teach their dogs to alert.
There's something incredibly subtle.
No, on some sort of verbal command,
right.
The officer will have a thing. He'll be saying, work it, whatever he's saying, and then he'll say 2 or 3 words, and he's trained the dog. And they sound, if it's like being recorded, it sounds like just normal flow of commands. But he's trained the dog on his own time that when the dog hears those 3 words to alert. Okay. And the other thing is too, I mean, we've seen this in like video from the Border Patrol stops down near the border where they're stopping people within America traveling on the highways.
Oh yeah, within 100 miles, yeah.
We've seen them in videotapes there. The dog walked behind the car. The dog never changes demeanor, never alerts, and then the Border Patrol comes to the window and says, the dog alerted on the trunk of your car, step out of the car, please, and they proceed with the search. Fortunately, there was a videotape showing that the dog never alerted.
Yeah.
For these reasons, I think canines should go away because we know for a fact cops lie. Not all cops, but we know cops lie.
Yeah, and this also goes back to a few years ago when the Supreme Court ruled on search incident to arrest. There used to be where before a vehicle was towed, they would search it and log everything. And if they found something in there illegal, they could charge them with it. And it got back to, you're stopped for whatever reason, reasonable suspicion, maybe not even probable cause. Sir, can we search your vehicle? And no. So then they find some reason, maybe you have something hanging off of your rearview mirror, which is an obstruction. It's okay, well, I'm going to place you under arrest for that.
Which normally would be a citation, except they're trying
right.
to
So
pump up a private situation.
Then they arrest the person. Now they can go in there and search the car because it's incident to arrest. Well, the Supreme Court pulled that away. Now they say if you have them in custody and you believe there's probable cause to search the car,
get a warrant.
Then you can apply for a warrant based on probable cause. That's how you can do it. So this is I guess an application of this, you can't just arrest somebody so that you can ask somebody else. And this doesn't include like a housekeeper that's over every other Tuesday to clean up, or your gardener, or somebody that's in there fixing something, a plumber. They don't have lawful control. They couldn't possibly say, hey, go ahead and check it out.
It's got to be somebody who has legal control over the property and grant that consent. Now, a lot of people, you and I have grave concerns over how a significant part of the law enforcement community conducts themselves.
Oh, yes.
And I think that's a lot of the angst that people feel over this decision. They say, whoa, 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 you give the cops half an opportunity to lie and abuse the system, and they're going to do that. They're going to convince themselves, pat on the back, I'm doing this for the most moral and righteous of reasons, and they're going to convince themselves of that, and they're going to lie and do, and we know that some will. However, I'm not one of these people that says, in every case, because we know that cops are human, and that includes lying and cheating and stealing, as well as being righteous, okay? There are righteous cops out there as well. You and I know some of them.
Yes, we do.
Okay. I'm not one of these people who say, because there are bad cops, we have to take every tool away, or because there are bad cops, we have to make decisions that aren't really good decisions just to sort of protect from the bad cops. The answer is you make the decision that the law dictates, that the circumstances dictate, if you're a judge. You make the decisions that the law dictates, the circumstance dictates. And the best thing I can suggest at this point in our history is, and my friend Ryan Ramsey, who was here last Wednesday, big advocate of body cams. Body cams will solve so many problems. In Florida, they're working on making it mandatory. They're working on legislation to make it mandatory. Every single cop.
It would have solved my problem. You know, again, never let him search, never talk to him. I was trying to talk to this cop a little over a month ago on an intellectual, human level, dealing with the law and on a level so he can understand where I got my information from. And that's where he turned it around and performed what is essentially an illegal arrest, which he's going to pay for in the civil courts, because I'm going to go after this. I'm not going to let it lie.
Good. And, you know, there's already a bunch of deputies on the department who've cost the county some money. You would think the current sheriff would want to get rid of the ones that are going to cost him some more.
You would think. But anyhow, just don't let him search and don't talk to cops, and we'll be back next week.
Take care. Bye-bye.